where's your trademark hat?
Is that my trademark hat now?
Why not, man? James True, welcome back to the program, man. Love your backdrop there. Love the guitars back there.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my office.
Well, we'll have to do a Skype a concert, free concert, man. And then what would be like a benefit. Now, who do we want to benefit with our Live Aid concert?
Typically, people tell me if they want me to play a benefit, they want me to stop playing.
Oh,
and then
okay.
they consider that that's the benefit.
Yeah.
So.
I was going to say maybe we could play a benefit for all the people in Los Angeles that they're taking dumps on the street, and the benefit would be give them toilet paper instead of using their hand.
Well, that could be one thing we could do with our time. I don't know. It's almost seems like a lost cause out there. You know, it's getting pretty bad. It's already been bad, and now it's just getting worse, and people are calling it normal.
Speaking of normal, James, is anybody ever really ready to be on this program? What does it take? What did you do to psych up for this broadcast?
I shaved. Doesn't look like it, but I did some grooming.
Good.
I manscaped.
Okay.
I just freaked out because I couldn't get my microphone to register at 8:29, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" So I was like ripping all these USB cords out. Didn't want to let you down. Got it plugged in. The second I plugged it in, and it showed up as a device you called. So that's what happened. I've been in the bullpen since 8:10, and it took me till 8:27 to figure out my microphone didn't work. So I'm a neophyte here. I'm doing the best I can to reach you and not screw up. So.
Oh man, I tell you what, it sounds like a pre-show event here every week. Man, I tell you what, though, I was giving the folks some of the contents of your book, and I may have missed a couple of them last time we talked because chapter 19, we don't have to start there, but the eugenics of LGBT, that's a new one. There's so many, the Excalibur of 9/11. I don't, and the psychology of the Big Bang. I don't know that we hit those topics. We were going so fast and furious. But before we get going, why don't you sort of reintroduce yourself to the folks there about who you are and why you wrote this book?
I'm James True. I'm a former software programmer. Not that I don't do that anymore, but people in the normal world don't hire me anymore. They found me to be a little bit too short-tempered in the sense of how much kind of mind control I can take. So I'm an author who used to write in digital language, and now I write in human language. So instead of me coding software, I'm coding humanware in the form of books. And my second book is Blueprints of Mind Control. That's the book you were just talking about. And my first book is called The Spell of Six Dragons. It's more of an autobiography kind of a story. The Blueprints, though, is more about here's what's happening in our world, and here's why things are nuts. And that's why I talk about weird topics like the eugenics of LGBT, and then right after that go into the satanic ritual of 9/11 and all these different topics. My goal is to take a can opener into everyone's head and show them, hey, look, let some air in, because under the auspices of being patriotic or under the auspices of fitting into society, we've been accepting some things that aren't true. And they've been using our trust against us. So that's kind of what the whole point of the book is supposed to show you, look, there's a blueprint. It's always the same way. Mind control always happens the same way. And that's really what this book touches on. It just does it in 47, different chapters, which are each different sort of short stories that open up a different box inside of our society and kind of show you what's inside and why it has the corners where it does and why we get trapped in thinking without even knowing that we're trapped in the thinking. That's really what makes it so clever and why I think the book's so important.
Well, that's interesting, everything you just said there, because I don't want my thoughts and what I believe to be altered by mind control. And I know that there has to be things that I believe that have been altered in some way. So, I mean, I want to use the same fervor of learning things as much fervor to unlearn things that were based on a lie or based on programming. In fact, in our Bear report, Bear was saying that I think it was Vermont just passed a law that anybody with a coat hanger can go out there and perform an abortion. Now, it's interesting. We started with we got to have control and we got to have freedom, reproductive freedom. That's what they call it. So we don't have coat hanger abortions. Go back in what, in the 70s, flip forward 50 years. Now we're right back where we were. Anybody, a plumber can do an abortion. Your cousin Vinny, he can do an abortion. If you got a stick or any kind of device, you just get up in there and start grabbing stuff. But that to get to that point, people have to be programmed, do they not, James True, that those aren't living beings inside the womb, and certainly they're not living beings on the table. I mean, people they will argue with you about that point, that they're not human. How do they get to that point?
Well, that's actually an important part of keeping all the cattle in order, is to make sure that none of the cattle think that they are too big for the ranch. They need to all fit in. Everyone needs to go to their pen at night. Everyone needs to accept the suction udders that milk them. Everyone needs to smile when they come to chop your balls off. This is how you run a good farm. This is how a rancher does a good job. So part of that is you need to install the idea that the humans are beasts, that they are animals themselves. And to do that, you need to devalue life and what we consider life in every way possible. That's why you have the Big Bang Theory, because you have a shame quotient that's coming in where they're literally telling you, hey man, you're pond scum, like you're billion trillion year old pond scum. Like, in your best moments in life, you were able to fornicate your way out of a pond and to have sex with this mutant fish, frogman, I should say. And then from that, you were only lucky enough to grow a big enough foot with a big enough Achilles to screw other monkeys and then have sex with those. But even that, you're not good enough because you were a mutant strain of those monkeys now. So if you think about what happens to your mind, picture being brought up that way from a very young age. Picture being told from a very young age, babies are parasites growing inside of the womb of someone who's being violated by the birth of that child. So you can see how it's the exact same fits. They're setting up a paradigm that human beings are foreign to this land. We don't belong here. We are a cancer. Our own breath is poisoned. Our CO2 that comes out of our lungs is now being called poison. And by setting up that strategy, it comes back to the rancher, and this is how you manage cows. No, not one cow is going to stand up and say, I deserve more, if they've been brought up the entire time thinking, this is my purpose here. I am a strain to everyone. The farmer is blessing me by allowing me to live. That's why all the mind control fits the way it does. That's why government works the way it does. Our government isn't evil. Our government's doing what any government does to maintain a ranch, to maintain a cattle farm. And that's really what we're living under right now.
Where do you see the social media giants in this equation?
So the social media giants are actually more about the government than the actual elected officials are. Keep in mind that the District of Columbia is a corporation, and separate from this corporation but still tied into it are the Seven Sisters of Big Oil. These have been branched off into the 5 big conglomerate companies right now that literally control every product that you ingest, but more importantly, every commercial you take, everything. If this was about money, YouTube would not be censoring anyone. They actually would be showing off about, look at what a great platform we have. You can literally see everything. They would be hiring lawyers to fight off free speech things when they have like a jihadist, who's uploading films. Like that's what YouTube would be if they were a true someone who's just trying to survive, someone who's trying to make it in the economic world. That's not what's happening. That's not what's happened for a long, long time. Twitter and Facebook were installed by these corporations to be the harbinger of the new media. The old media, just like the old Hollywood, has been purposely shot in the head in public on purpose. This is actually how you steer people into a new form of media. This is why you have the painting of the alt-right as like a racist element, and then you have a censorship, a pretend censorship over certain people on the right, but all of them have in common that they will not criticize Israel in any way. And then you have this other realm, which is actual real people like you and me that are just simply trying to tell their story and trying to convey the truth in the best way they can. You and I are in this because we're trying to survive. a corporation, one of these five corporations, isn't in this to survive. They are well past that level of the pyramid. You know, there's a survival pyramid where food, clothing, shelter becomes important. When they keep us down in that level, we're not able to focus on how does my bloodline live in the world? How do I survive? What's going to happen 3 generations from now? What am I going to be handing my generation 3 generations from now? Because I'm not a bull that's going to get my nuts cut off. I'm an elite free man. I'm living among these cattle, but I'm a free man. And that's when you can really start to understand how this paradigm works and why they're actually shooting themselves in the foot. It looks like economically, but mind control wise, they're actually doing everything brilliantly to maintain that same state of mind that we're in, where if they're telling us we're in the land of the free, Daniel, not one of us would ever question, hey, could we be more free? Could we be more sovereign? All these are part of the exact same tactics. You install this overarching government authority, and then you come in and you just fill in all the lies you need to make sure that you have that feeling that there's this overpowering great sovereign lord that's going to, come in and kill Iran because they're 6 months away from the nuclear bomb, or they're going to, broadcast a signal 200 million light years away and take a picture of a black hole. All these things are meant to give us this idea that we are living among giants, and these giants are taking care of us. This is very important. There wouldn't be government if there wasn't mind control. There would not be government. Well, in fact, the word government means mind control.
Well, James, has this? How long has this plan been in effect? Because even at my young age, I remember that at least from the religious standpoint, and probably even from schools, they taught us that the government needs to be respected. Back when they actually taught respect for government and for those in authority. Now they don't, of course. But they set forth a path to where people intrinsically, without even thinking about it, trusted what the government said. The government said there's no UFOs. You're a nutcase if you believe there are. If the government says we're not being invaded in the southern border, then we're not being, what I'm saying? So we've kind of been taught all these things. The government says that fluoride is great for your teeth. Never mind. You can't think after you brush your teeth. But we were taught that. So now here we are, almost on like an auto trajectory. But what's happened now is they're bringing us to places so far and so fast that I'm hoping that people are waking up that trust has to be earned now. In the beginning, it wouldn't be questioned, but now I believe it's come back around where you don't trust them.
Yeah, I think you've really hit the key there. The trust is, our trust is being used against us. We are empathic creatures as humans. Most of our brain is mammalian. It's these 2 outer lobes that are all about trust and empathy and creating a relationship with other dolphins, but they're humans instead. Government uses that to their advantage, and they've been doing that for a long, long time. You could trace this back to Egypt, man. Back in the days of Egypt, literally the pharaoh would come out at 13 years old. He would put his wanker on a stone in broad daylight and chop off the end of it. And that was him training everyone else in his cult. Be like me, circumcise your boy. This is how you install a trauma mind control program. You need the trauma, you need the pain, and then as soon as the pain comes in, then you're ready to install whatever kind of message you want to send. So most of our trauma-based programming now is fear-based. Most of what they give us now is more about, you need to be afraid of Iran. You need to be afraid of this, or you need to be afraid of that. We're going to solve that, but you first have to be afraid. That's why they shot JFK. That's why all of our false flags have happened. These things, it's weird. What's really sick about it is when we look at the truth of what happened in 9/11, we might look at it now and go, that's horrendously huge. I can't believe that ever happened. But if you look back in history, World War II was 9/11 times 20. The history that we're being taught is a very curved, distorted, one-sided view of history. And that history was actually installed by the Rockefeller family. The invention of the General Education Board in 1918 or something like that. Actually, 1908, I think, really started to set these ideas in motion that we need a country. Now that the Civil War's over, because the Civil War really, in my opinion, was the end of America. It was the end of a sovereign confederacy where each state was able to experiment with their own democracy. After the Civil War, that really changed, and it really became a centralized power. And Rockefellers they were making 3,000% upgrade on the price of oil during the Civil War, and they were owned 90% of the market, so they were making all the profits from this. But all that to say, as soon as 1900 came around, the General Education Board came out. Rockefeller started the American Association of legislators. So it was like all the state legislators were now in a club. And then he started the American Small Business Association kind of thing. That's not exactly it, but it was another organization. All this is covered in one of my articles on Rockefeller, by the way. But it shows that these talents, these really thick, dangerous talents, were starting to be sunk into the meat of America, into our backs. And that's why it's only gotten worse. The reason why it keeps getting worse is because sovereignty is no longer valued, and no one's willing to put up the sweat equity that's required to keep it. Sovereignty is something that you pay into. Each of us, each of our generations, should be looking at our children going, how can my children be more sovereign? What can I do in this lifetime to make sure that they become more sovereign later, not the other way around?
Yeah.
This is part of the mind control.
Here's a little trick that I just found out about here recently. Now, there's been a lot of disclosures about the Navy fighter pilots having incidences with UFOs, and they're releasing their transcripts and their testimonies now. And I think even George Stephanopoulos actually asked Donald Trump about those testimonies from the Navy, the pilots, as far as disclosing that. But back in the day, Harry Reid started a program. It was called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. But the thing is, the way why he did that was because everybody was submitting Freedom of Information Acts for UFOs. And so they conveniently rewrote the title so that the Freedom of Information Act couldn't get the information that they were going through and producing there from the Navy files and the government files itself. But that just shows you a way how they trick the population. They manipulate us in different ways, playing games with our own government. Isn't that a typical example?
Yeah, I've been saying this a lot. That mind control will continue until sovereignty improves. As long as we keep accepting this, as long as we keep just believing whatever we're being told, it's only going to get worse. This is no different than being in a relationship with someone who's cheating on you. You're in that relationship, and because you've invested so much, you've got your houses together, you've got cars, you've got mortgages, you've got kids, whatever it takes. You've invested all this stuff in there, and you're just flat out in denial that someone's lying to you, that someone's cheating on you. And part of that denial is you don't know what to do to fix it. You've never even considered being sovereign. And that's how we've been taught. That's why when you're in the grocery store and you're just trying to buy frickin' mustard, there's a love song on that's saying, I'm so destroyed without you, I'm codependent. Like everything is about this systematic destruction of the sovereign, self-supreme man. And that's the real key word. It's why they choose to shame the word supremacy. Supremacy is the mastery of self. To be self-supreme is to master yourself. This used to be what men wanted to do. In fact, men didn't walk around with smiles all the time. A cool man was not a guy that's just smiling at everybody like, that's like psychopathic, man. I mean, it's cool for women and kids to do that, but men didn't used to do that way. We were about action. We were about, this is what I do. You know, you're going to like me because of what I do. You're going to respect me for my actions, not for my freaking smile. And that's where this psychopathic culture comes in, where we're shaming each other into going, hey, you need to smile more, or chin up, or hey, why are you being so negative about sovereignty, or whatever. This is how the mind control works. It's shaming you. It's creating calories. You have to burn calories to poke through the truth. Just like I have to burn calories if I'm going to go home to my parents who I love and tell them JFK was shot by members of our own government. That's not going to work. Like that's going to take a lot of calories to pull off. And that's not my parents. It's not their fault. That's what mind control does. And that's why it works. That's why it's such a great cipher. You can literally walk around with your eyes closed and just say something. And as soon as you hear someone call you a name, you could probably look at that issue and go, there's mind control here.
Well, let me ask you something now. Did you just use some mind control on me a few minutes ago because I'm still traumatized talking about a man getting his balls cut off. Okay, I got a little trauma going on from that. So from that, were you trying to mind control me, James?
I'm not that. So my book is actually an attempt to mind control the reader because it's trying to show you the same blueprint that's there over and over again. It's why a lot of people like my style of writing. I call it pulp nonfiction because it's showing you the truth, but it's really pulping it up in a way that makes it easier to leave with a reverberation from it. That's why a lot of people say that my chapters are really moving and stirring. It's the whole idea. When we get trauma programmed, the reason why trauma programming works is because it's that first short, sharp shock of pain that injects us, whether it be a trauma or whether it even be your mom smacking you on the butt because you're about to stick a fork in the electrical outlet. Mm-hmm. That smack on the butt raises your awareness. You are now hyper aware. You're like, oh God, something's here. So now every receptor in your entire being is open. Mm-hmm. You are dilated, you're fully dilated. You are now ready. And that's where trauma programming comes in. That's usually why a mom will scold their child. The child will be silent during the entire thing. And then there'll be like a 4-second pause. And then boom, their ego comes back. The child returns to normal activity. The trauma programming is done. And now he's going to cry probably, because his mom smacked him. But before he cried, he was in this state, this trauma state of like a voodoo, no different than a freaking witch doctor coming up and blowing white powdered smoke in your face. And for the first few seconds, he's going to be able to tell you whatever he wants to tell you because you're just so startled by what just happened. Mm-hmm. This is how trauma programming works. This is exactly how it works. This is why it's done this
I'll tell you what, man, I'm traumatized every time I see Hillary's face or Maxine Waters or Michael Obama. I mean, they're traumatizing me all the time. I'm trying to figure out what they're trying to do to me. But speak about sticking a fork in the socket, man. When I was a kid, I discovered electricity when I pulled a plug out from the wall and I took my belt buckle and I easily dropped it down right in there till short. Boom, big fire. Happened, blew a fuse. Mom and Dad never did figure that one out.
Oh, yeah. And as we gain our sovereignty, we're learning how to work around the system.
Well, I guess you could say that. I guess you could say that I use mind control on them because I said my brother did it.
Yeah, I snuck out of the house once, and I got locked out of the house. I was a teenager, and so the way I got back in was I took off all my clothes, I rang the doorbell, my dad opened the door. And I said, hey, I'm sorry I got locked out. I thought I heard the cat outside. And so then I was able to walk inside. And then the next morning I had to go get my clothes out. So that was like the only time I've ever pulled over anything smart on them. So most of the time I got busted.
Man, with a name like James True, huh? That story's true now. Wow. Well, there you go. So we're looking at some of these titles here now. And I want to talk about this one right here. Vampires at Chickamauga. What is that?
Vampires of Chickamauga Battlefield is I grew up in Tennessee in a city outside of Chattanooga, a city, and just south of Chattanooga is really a lot of Civil War history. Right. Chickamauga is it's like River of Blood or something, or Blood Creek kind of thing. But a lot of battles happened there. And I grew up understanding that the story, this is actually a benefit of growing up in the South. I was able to grow up and go locally to the Chickamauga battlefield and listen to history, like real life passed down history of what was happening. And then I was able to compare that to what was actually happening in school, like what they were telling me, the Civil War was all about. So in school, they're telling me, well, it's because the white man is an evil cancer that they invoked slavery, and so it was necessary for us to draw. There was an imaginary line, and everyone north believed this, and everyone south believed. Like I was able to listen to that mind control, and then still go to Chickamauga battlefield and actually hear the stories of the descendants, and realize, wow, this is bullshit. Like everything that they're telling me here is bullshit. And then I was able to actually, pierce into that. So what that story is it's a peek inside the real history of the Civil War as told from Chickamauga, as told from that actual what was happening. So it talks about Custer. It talks about how not only was this not liberation, but we literally left Appomattox to move north to slaughter Indians like the very next week. Like the very next week, Custer was at Appomattox. He's like got cinnamon in his hair. He's walking around with a journalist who's telling cute stories about him. He leaves the next week to do the exact same thing to the Indians. So what we're calling the Civil War is a total farce. All of our history has been overwritten by what was actually happening underneath. The Cherokee Nation, oh my goodness, the amount of history that's just in there. Thousands, not half, but a good majority of the Cherokee Nation was either white or African American. This was a real live living culture. And so when people were settling here in America, we didn't have to centralize into a pyramid. So we were able just to blend in with the land. And that's what was happening with the Cherokee Nation. In fact, before the Confederacy, there was the Iroquois Confederacy. So even the Confederacy is not like a new special thing. We were adopting what was happening around us in the land all around us. And frankly, I want to get us back there. That's really where we need to go.
In your view, was the Civil War based on slavery or states' rights?
No, it was definitely, it actually, although states' rights, I think, was more important. If you look into the tariffs, especially the abomination tariff of 42, I think that's really, or maybe it's 28, that's really when you really started to push hard because the North was literally tariffing the South as much as their own GDP. It was a constriction technique, the same technique we had on Japan, the same technique for the USS Panay, the same technique we had in World War I, and the same technique we had in World War II. You're utilizing constriction to force the hand of someone. That's why Fort Sumter wasn't full of slaves. If the American Civil War was about slavery, slavery would have come up within the first year and a half.
Well, that brings me to the programming part of this. Historically, it is clear that the Democrats were battling for slavery. They created the Jim Crow laws. They were against the Civil Rights Act of 64. They were blocking schools. It was the Democrats. But if you ask most Democrats today, they say, "Oh, so mean old Republicans, they're the ones that they want to put us." In fact, I think was it Joe Biden said they want to put us back in the plantation. How can they even? And then you've got Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood who did a speech at the KKK, man, and she wanted to exterminate the entire race. But now they're embracing her as some kind of folk hero. Isn't that the epitome of brainwashing?
It is, absolutely. And that's why there's always two sides. It makes it easier to brainwash. You just have to divide down the middle. It was actually the purpose of the Mason-Dixon line. If you really start to look in the real reasons of that, it wasn't even really about sovereignty, although that was really important. What actually was happening is this: a centralization was happening. A cancer was metastasizing, or whatever you call that, where it was actually taking root inside of our country. And the South just was fighting that more. Slavery was already dying in America. This was something that was already happening anyway. That's why it didn't come up until a year and a half. I want to remind people that I think it was Missouri and Louisiana, after the Emancipation Proclamation, the slaves in those states were still slaves. This had nothing to do with let's liberate people. This was, we have to stop the South from trying to gain their sovereignty. These people are ridiculous. That's actually why they shame the South so much, calling them inbred, rednecks, white supremacists. It's very important that they keep the South down because honestly, the sigil of the Confederate flag, that emblem, is so powerful, especially when you mix that with our First Amendment rights. Your Second Amendment rights, you're really looking at a dangerous powder keg for sovereignty. That's why so much of the media is invested on keeping the South down. Because if anything was to happen in America where we were to regain our sovereignty, it probably would come from the South. I'm not saying it necessarily would, but it could. Either that or Maine, or
James,
Texas.
Okay, James, true. With concerning your book, Blueprints of Mind Control, is there any? Have you developed or have any inclination of how one could do a self-check to find if we've been programmed and our views are our own? Is there any kind of self?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the first step in the book, which is on page 1. I don't screw around, man. I want people to have something out of this book right away. So from page 1, it's telling you the entire problem. And then it's going to use the rest of the book to make sure you understand what that problem is. And on page 1, it defines the worst thing that causes mind control more than anything else is no one ever thinking to ask, is that true? This is how lies are allowed into your house because you have a dog door on it with our government. The government's like our dog, and they're allowed to come in that dog door. They can bring in whatever they want. They can bring in mud. They can bring in rodents. It doesn't matter. They can bring in other bitches from the street. It does whatever they want to bring in. They can. When you ask, is that true? You are stopping that. You are looking at everything that the government tells you, and you're saying, hey, you know what? You've lied to me like literally every time. So from now on, I'm going to have to treat you like I would a teenager that is rebelling against me. This is the big problem. We've been flipped. Government is the child of the people, not the other way around. Government is the child of the people. And that's what we've forgotten. That's part of the mind control. So back to your question, the first thing is that true? Learning how to ask, is that true? Then the second step is understanding how the blueprint works. And there's 3 steps. They're really, really simple. Step 1 is the mind control. The government is going to convince you are broken. It has to convince you're broken. If you're not broken, you're not going to fall for this stuff. Step 2 is just as crucial. The solution lies outside of yourself. Okay, that's why it's always an ascension program. It's always a never-ending goalpost that can get moved back. That's why things like you're racist work so well for mind control, because there's never a point where you cannot be racist. And that's how you're actually looking for help outside you, because you need someone else to tell you when you're being racist, because that's just how frickin' racist you are. So step 2 creates that codependency outside of yourself, right? So step 1, you're broken. Step 2, you're codependent. You need help from someone else to do that. And then step 3 is really harvesting. It's how can I recruit you? In other words, you're giving virtue. This is why virtue signaling is so crucial, Daniel.
Yeah.
You're giving virtue to someone who services the cult. So if I go out and say, well, I'm a white male, but Daniel, now that guy's really racist. I'm getting virtue by calling you racist, because it's making me look less racist. And that virtue, when you're inside of a mind control cult, that virtue is worth money, because everyone is shamed. That's why we all have to be shamed. If we aren't shamed normally, they have nothing to constrict to feed us. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like you don't want to give the prisoner all the food in the morning and then hope that he'll behave all day. What you want to do is lead him on. You want him to believe it's coming, but you also want to work him as much as you possibly can to make that happen. Yeah. And that's really what a recruitment is all about. And that's really why step 3 is so valuable. That's why they're so satanic about it, because they literally are trying to see, how can I get more juice out of this frog on this treadmill, or whatever the analogy is.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, I sure hope people were paying attention to what you just said. I was paying attention to every single word, and it was awesome, man. The description of how that is done. Speaking of virtue shaming, of course, every major corporation is a full-on race to shame everyone and to virtue signal everywhere. Now I've already given up Nike, Gillette. I'm still worried. I'm still occasionally show up at a Starbucks, but hey, in fact, I went the other day on Gay Day, and they were playing Elton John songs all day. So I was saying, okay, I got that right.
Think about it, Daniel, because that actually hurts their bottom line. That shows you that this isn't about money. This has nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, these are the same people that print the money.
Yeah.
So it's really silly for us to think that a parent is going to be just as invested in playing Monopoly with the kids as the kids are. That's not even their real money. The parents have their own real money.
Right.
They use their own money separate from the child.
Right. And you go to any Target and you see gay clothing for kids right in the front, man. So I don't want to see that. Okay. Put the gay kids' clothes in the back next to the tranny section. Don't want to see that. Okay. So I don't go there either. And I think they even stopped naming the toy lines, toys for boys and toys for girls. So that's that kind of crap just going all over. But let me ask you, let's test this. Is it true with this current event in the last day or so? Did the Iranians torpedo the tankers?
Yeah.
Is it true?
And how could they?
How
could they? Well, this is a great opportunity to look at that. If you just use discernment, you just have to look and go, how does this benefit? Who's going to benefit from us believing this story? And once you start to understand this blueprint, you can start to see everything from the Hegelian dialectic. It's basically setting up 2 parameters. almost like a funnel. And no matter where the person ends up, if they're going to hit the left or they're going to hit the right, they're still going to end up going through that gauntlet that you pre-predicted for them. So if you think about Iran, all you really have to look at is who benefits from this lie and who does benefit. Well, there's 3 countries, only 3 now, that aren't part of the World Bank, just 3. And Iran's one of them. On top of that, you have the Greater Israel narrative, which is something I wrote about last summer that's very important. America has gotten in bed with Zionism. We believe in Zionism so much that we're willing to give our own money, our own blood, our own children to make that happen. And Trump campaigned on that. He won the election on that, and he's fulfilling that promise. I think Saudi Arabia probably has already fallen. I think that right now it looks like it's controlled by the same people, but maybe it's not.
Okay.
And if you look back in history, this happens all the time with countries where countries are overthrown, but no one necessarily knows what's happening yet.
Okay.
So
well, James,
the Greater Israel's coming. That's why Iran is in the way, because the Greater Israel is the territory between the Euphrates and the Tigris. I'm sorry, guys, it's another river, but it's a giant swath of land, and it includes half of Iraq, half of Saudi Arabia, Iran. All that is going to be, in my opinion, that's going to be the new Israel, the Greater Israel. This is a 102-year-old plan, the Balfour Declaration, that we're seeing still happening around us.
Okay, let's ask this question here. Trump colluded with the Russians. Is this true?
My take is that he probably had to collude with the Russians to even win an election. I don't see a problem with colluding, though, because the colluding is just a mind control word for meaning you had a conversation with someone from there. When I say collude, though, I'm under the impression that Putin and Trump are in similar roles in their life. And because of this, they might be agents of sovereignty more than, say, anyone else is. And because of that, I think that there would be a natural inclination for there to be some sort of conversations that happen. I don't think that they would ever be something as dastardly or as evil as, say, being at a UN event and covering your microphone and turning to Russia and saying, hey, after the election, I can stop lying to you about this,
Right.
you know. I mean, now, if Trump was to do something like that, I probably would be a little bit more upset about it. But, because of the mind control.
Okay. All
and
right.
because it's a black man can say that. No one's allowed to shame him for that. Now, maybe it's because he's black or he's not. The point I'm trying to make is that when you set up all this mind control, when you set it up like this, when we set up a world where literally everything we touch is like that game of Operation, where if you touch the tweezers too close to the sidewall, you're going to get buzzed, that we aren't even allowed to criticize our own government for fear of what it might cause. That's why the border is so tied in with racism, saying, well, if you want a border, it means you're racist.
Right.
It's like, that's how insane it is. That's how completely insane it is. But it's also insane to say that we're going to spend 18 months talking about a Mueller investigation. That's completely no. I know that that's bullshit. When I see that, I say, is that true? And the answer is no. Because there's no reason why a government why anyone would have to agree to putting up with that long of an investigation where nothing else is allowed to happen because you're dealing with this one little bit of scrutiny. That's why I don't have a lot of faith in most of the narratives that the government gives us. It's also why I don't have a lot of faith in whoever's going to be in charge, because whoever's going to be there, even though it's Donald Trump now, it's going to have the same vision. They want a strong, centralized federal district, separate from the country, sovereign land. D.C. was never attacked on 9/11. The Pentagon was not in D.C. No, it's in Virginia. It's right across the border. D.C.'s never been attacked. We have to get away from being run by a corporation. We have to return to a bioregional government, something I just wrote about, but it's basically a fancy word for returning to a state of confederacy, or returning to a state of sovereignty, where we control our own airspace again. Where if there's going to be a war with Iran, instead of us being enlisted 8 years prior, like I did, and said, well, I agree from now until the next 8 years, anyone you want to kill, I'm blindly agreeing to do that, because that's what I did when I enlisted. Why don't we change it where we own the militia again? Where if you want to have a war, since we don't get to vote, since Congress no longer has war powers, how about the next conflict we have? People don't enlist, they muster, like Minutemen muster, meaning if you believe in this fight, you're going to show up at 6 a.m. tomorrow, and you're going to get on a frickin' boat and you're going to go kill some people
Okay.
because that's how strongly
let me
you
try
feel
this one
about
on
it.
you. Maxine Waters is stupid as hell. Is this true?
Um, I don't think that she has autonomy. See, a lot of elites are like thoroughbred horses, Daniel.
Hmm.
I don't want to throw us off too much here, but I write about this a lot in my book, Blueprints of Mind Control,
You're
because
giving me a straight answer here. All right.
yeah, there are
Okay.
thoroughbreds that are in our government.
Yeah.
So you need to think about this like horse racing, okay?
Okay.
And I don't know horses that well, but let's
No,
just say,
I do. I do.
Black Streak
I'm
won
cowboy.
won the Kentucky Derby, okay?
Yeah.
Like whoever won the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
Think about the autonomy of that horse. Like think about what that horse's daily life is like their entire life. They're getting their feet car waxed. They're getting, haircuts every day. They're being probed up the ass with weird chemicals. Probably all their urine's being analyzed. Their feces is being
Wait a minute.
collected.
Who
and
we
sent
talking
to a
about?
lab.
Who we talking about?
I'm talking about thoroughbred horses right now.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Peter Buttgig. You said taking it up
But
the ass.
what I mean is that these are the same kind of. This is how elites live their lives. They're more like thoroughbred race cars. They're not meant to be like a tractor where you can just take them out in the field and get some work done. These are low clearance. You're going to have the right road. You're going to have to write everything for them. That's why people like Maxine Waters they're not really there, but
No.
they're still in power.
No, not
Pelosi
really
is
there,
the same
no.
way. Most
Yeah.
of our legislature is that way.
Mhm.
They are more tokens.
Mhm.
Dual citizenship, I think, even just how many are dual citizens shows you right there just
Yeah.
how messed up the system is, and why is it not one congressman has ever said, hey, I think dual citizens should be like, no, you can't be a senator. Look, if you're gonna claim that you live in this country and this country, you don't get to be a senator. We only want senators here who are just from America. Like no one's
Right.
ever brought that up, Daniel. This tells me that we are not being told government is not what we think it is. It's more about the corporations or more the government. The government is almost like a psyop where it's giving us this opinion, this impression that, oh, we almost won the election, but we lost. We won the popular vote, but we lost the electoral college.
I mentioned Peter butt plug, but this goes to the shaming thing. His whole message is going to be, you're not voting for me because you're a homophobe. There's
Yeah.
that shame right there's a shame that he's going to try to shame America, saying, "Oh, America's not ready because you're a bunch of homophobes." Well, maybe we just don't want people, parading their sexuality at the highest office of the land. That's being
and it
gay
worked
is
for
not a
Obama.
platform.
Yeah, it worked for Obama. Why not? And one of my most controversial chapters, sadly, is maybe not my most controversial, but it causes trouble. Is the eugenics of LGBT, and it's actually explaining what do all the letters in LGBT stand for. Now, look, what I'm about to say is I'm not even talking about gay people. I'm talking about there's an event called June Pride Month where we're pushing pedophilia, where we're literally sexualizing and developing the pituitary gland in children under 12 years old during the entire month of June, right when they're out of school. Okay, right when they're out of school, when they're at home and there's nothing else to do, they're going to be watching TV and they're going to see this kind of stuff. LGBT has nothing to do with being homosexual. What is LGBT? All the letters have the same thing in common. Everyone who has that letter has agreed that they will only have sex with someone that will not lead to a reproduction. It will not lead to someone having children. Two lesbians are not going to scissor each other and have a baby.
Oh.
Two men are not going to bump their grind and a baby's going to come out. Yes, you could
scissor?
argue that bisexual could, but you're still cutting the chance in half. The point is that the LGBT movement as a corporate movement, I'm not talking about homosexuals right now, I'm talking about the corporate movement, LGBT, has been installed to install the idea that we are more gender fluid, that we are more prone to being gay, to being whatever it takes to stop us from reproducing.
Wait.
LGBT is a eugenics program.
Okay, I got traumatized there. What is scissoring? Is that some kind of act?
Yeah, that's an act where here's two
Okay,
great
so
women.
they're like they got both their vaginas are going like this or something.
Yeah, yeah, it's the vagina monologues, but it's like two of them having a
Kind of scissors.
soliloquy at the same time.
There's a whole new term to rock paper scissors, man. Now it's like I
Yeah,
mean I got the rock from the guy, but I don't know what the scissors. This thing's getting weird, man.
yeah, I don't know what paper would be, but
Well,
yeah, you
you've been
could argue that a
traumatizing
guy
me
would
all
be
night,
like
James.
pounding,
All right,
and
well
the
let's
women are the scissors, but I don't know what paper would be.
okay. That'd be the divorce papers for somebody.
There you go.
Look here. Curious out of the live chat says, is Trump controlled and is he going to bomb Iran?
So Trump is controlled in the sense that no one's going to be able to get to that power without having certain alliances. All of Trump's children converted to Judaism. You could argue that Barron is not, but all of them have converted. The marriage between Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump was no different than the King of France marrying his daughter off to the King of England. Kushner is the godchild of Netanyahu. This is a marriage between Israel and America. If you're not understanding that, you're missing a lot. So is Trump controlled? I would say yes and no. He's controlled in the sense that all the voters have told him, no matter what Israel does to the Palestinians, we have to help Israel. We don't care what they do to anyone else. We have to give them billions of dollars every year, and we have to agree to all their wars. This is the nature of America now. This is the mind control of America. So is Trump controlled? He understands where America's mind's at. He understands that he has to pay a debt to America. And but because he's such a beautiful persuader in the sense of he's so talented at it, he's allowed to actually tell us what he's going to pay us with. We don't even get to tell him what we want. And I think that what you're seeing with the wall, and I'm not even saying the wall is or is not important. What I'm trying to say is that the wall is being used as a token by him to say, this is me paying you back, the people, the voters. So in a way, Trump is controlled by that because he's controlled by all the interests. He's controlled by the Zionists. He's controlled by Israel. He's controlled by his family. He's controlled by the voters. He's literally controlled by everything, the Federal Reserve. It's part of why my book pushes sovereignty so much because people... Sadly, Daniel, the mind control has gotten so bad that people want to be saved more than they want to be liberated. In other words, the desire is to have someone come in and save them. That's what the mind control's taught us. It's made us powerless. So we're looking for this outside hope, hence Obama running on the same campaign. This is how America is sold every time, that there's a dire emergency and we have to have a savior to stop it. So it's continued. This is the drama of mind control. This is why it works. So we're all controlled, including Trump. But the people actually have more power than Trump does because we're the ones that get to control him by saying the wall's not good enough. We want more. We want Congress to have its War Powers Act back. We want NDAA repealed. We want the TSA privatized because no one's grabbing my butt anymore when I get on a plane. We want, there's all these things we could just roll back. We could roll back, but we're never going to get anyone in power who's going to be able to do that. The system is situated that way. Well, there'll never be a bioregionist like myself or a libertarian. Even a libertarian can't even get on the debate stage. We've got lawsuits over that. They're still not allowed. So it shows you what's happening.
By the way, now it looks like there's a question for me from Tiffany Grimmer. She says, Daniel, what do you do to prevent aging? You look great. Well, Tiffany, it's 2 words, Estee Lauder. So there you go. And all right, well let's get to it now. We got a Democrat. We got it's like a clown show over there, and of course I mentioned that Buddy Plug is going to be shaming people, saying, "Hey, you're a homophobe, so therefore you don't want to vote for me." And you got Elizabeth Warren saying, "Hey, you don't like Indians, so you're not going to vote for me." But it's a veritable clown show over there. And Joe Biden said, you don't want me sniffing little girls, so you got a problem with children. So we're all going to get shamed from them. But who do you see rising out of that pool of creeps, that creep show, they're rising to the top?
You mean to challenge?
Yeah. Who's going to be the head of that ilk? Who's going to be the contender against Trump out of that group?
I would say that right now, I don't think that whoever they're going to run against Trump, they actually would think would win. I don't think that that's even in their plan. It's more about what can we create the best show for all of us. So I think whoever that's going to be, it's going to be so tokenized that I would almost create the illusion that it's real by making a guess on it. I can't stress enough that the election of McCain versus Obama was Manchurian versus Manchurian. That it didn't matter which one we voted for there. We were going to be ruled by someone that was controlled in a very deep way by the deep state. And I think Trump has been given this second term. I don't think that there's any challenge for that unless something really catastrophic happens. But I just don't see that happening because I don't see the cabal on the run. I don't see I don't see these corporations freaking out right now because Trump's in charge. I don't see that. If I did, they wouldn't be focusing so much on their long-term goals. The vaccination stuff that they keep pushing, they're losing capital for that, which shows me that they're still investing in the long term in the mind control. If these people were desperate, if they were about to lose power, I think that they would, just like your body enters shock, and you're no longer going to be worrying about your immune system, for example, because now you're in shock. I think that we would be seeing this cabal turning off these tertiary long-term goals and just focusing on, getting Trump. I don't see that happening, which tells me it's business as usual. I was excited about Trump. I've never been more excited about anyone. But I understand what the system is. And more importantly, I don't blame Trump for it. I blame us for it. Like, I blame people for it. It's people that are creating this because we have our belief system in place. It's why I wrote my book. It's instead of me complaining to people about it, I spent 2 years trying to focus on how can I tell this story to convey the idea that you got to start asking, is it true? You got to start asking this stuff because I don't see any help ever coming from top down. It's going to have to be grassroots that, comes from the base up.
Speaking of grassroots, we have the social media giants have been slowly but surely exercising all conservative or right voices off their platforms, demonetizing them, just eliminating, shutting down channels left and right under the title of hate speech. And hate speech can be anything. And I think one of the algorithms they say that Facebook has is that you can be designated a hate person if you agreed with someone who they designated hate. If you agreed with that hate person in a post, then you're going to be kicked off. Or if you were neutral about their hate, you're going to be kicked off. I mean, so they're just cranking that down, just kick people off. But the only way that I see to get around that is for some other independent platform to be developed. But that would take a mass exodus at one time from their platforms to the new one. And I see it. I see people come all the time. They'll say, hey, I'm moving over to this. I'm moving over to that. So you got onesie, twosie. This onesie, twosie stuff's not going to work. But we all know that this game is being played against us. They are playing us like a fiddle, man. They're programming us. They're manipulating us. We all know it. But we don't have. How could we ever get people together enough to make that move at one time?
Well, if we could admit that Twitter and Facebook were never private companies, and we could just expose that. Eric Schmidt, the vice president of Google, for example, who's now at Alphabet, used to work for. Actually, I'm sorry. I think now he's going to the Department of Defense. These people are what we think is a corporate private company is not a private company. It's why Good Morning America, years and years ago, was pushing everyone to get on Facebook. Think about that. Good Morning America is its own brand. It's its own brand based on national television. Yet here's this corporation urging people to jump onto the internet and engage in a social media platform. This wasn't. This was all on purpose. This is what's part of it. So the way we can fix it is by admitting that these companies are not private companies, and that's going to eliminate most of the people that don't understand what's happening right now, because they're the ones that keep saying, "Hey, man, it's a private company. It's a private company." You can't tell them what to do, but you can, because there's something called the public square. This is a legally defined term. And if we had the right lawyers, if we had a real legal system in place, if we actually had that in place, we could bring cases up that would clearly show, no, Twitter is actually something that was funded by DARPA, by our own CIA. Same with Facebook. Not only that, but now they're public utilities because literally everyone has this. In fact, you're stifling someone's speech by censoring it. So a really grand move right now would be to bust all this and turn the internet into a public square.
Yeah.
You could actually turn the entire internet into a public square. But I'm talking about something, and no one would ever vote for me and put me in a position where I could do that, because I'm not going to be able to rise up in this system to gain the right people following to say, hey, I like this idea.
Yeah.
That's not really the system that we have in place, which is why I don't really put a lot of faith in looking for someone that we can send to Washington to fix it. I think the key is that we need to each write our own Declaration of Independence and say it out loud and send it to the government. And it's a declaration where you're basically regaining your sovereignty, and you're telling the world, I am not putting up with any more lies. I am a natural law human. I was born to the land. I am the living soil. I am not a cancer that was brought here to this magical land that belonged to the government before I got here. No. Government is the child of the people. That means the government is my child. I am sovereign over the government, not the other way around. To me, the only way America gets better is if all of us start doing that. If enough of us do that, it'll create that 100th monkey, or however you want to call it. It'll create the morphic resonance. Enough people will start to take off with that, and they will naturally find power in reclaiming their sovereignty. That's when homeschools are so important. That's why states' rights are so important. That's why anything that shrinks the federal government and returns power to a sovereign state. I personally like bioregions, but I don't want to complicate our conversation here. But there's something actually smaller than states called bioregions. I would prefer to see that, but I'll take whatever I can get. I want my government to be the same people I see in the grocery store, the same people I see in the hardware store. I want to make eye contact with them at church and know you're the person that said that we're going to have a month-long Pride Day, and we're going to turn 7-year-olds into drag queens. I want to look you in the eye when you do that. Right now, none of us can look those people in the eye. Those people are invisible. Those people are behind corporations. They're not even in the government. They're behind the corporations. And if we had the sovereignty that I'm talking about, if we had the confederacy that I'm talking about, a national chain company, it would be impossible. I mean, nearly impossible for them to create a company that's nationwide. I think that's a good, healthy thing, because that's going to create competition, and it's going to make people, it's going to bring the sovereignty back. So if Starbucks wants to, or Planned Parenthood wants to operate inside of Mississippi, what's wrong with letting Mississippi have their own idea that says, yeah, Planned Parenthood, if you want to open, you can, but you're going to have to kiss the ass of every single person that lives in the state. And we'll line them up, we'll have a day, and then, as long as you do that, then you've satisfied the requirements for Mississippi to have a business in Mississippi, and this is what you have to do. I'm being silly, but the point is that if you return the sovereignty to the land, you're going to start seeing all these experiments pop up again in democracy. And some are going to be awful, Daniel. Some are going to suck really bad. And those cities and those towns, those bioregions, they're going to fail, and they're going to learn from their mistakes. And other bioregions are going to take off. They're going to just flourish and bloom.
Well, I'll tell you what, James. I actually have a bioregion question for you, and I'd like to know your view on this, because it's going to put together several things you just were talking about. You just casually mentioned Mississippi. You talk about autonomy, local autonomy. Talking about biosphere. My wife has a cousin in Mississippi, and the floodwaters, as you know, the Midwest, and I don't know how much the United States is just underwater. Right now, where I'm at is under tornado warning, and we've had an unbelievable amount of rain here in Indiana, so much so the crops are way behind, and there may be a food shortage for all I know, because the farmers cannot plant their food. But back in Mississippi, where her cousin lives, their house is surrounded by water. And they have to take a boat from their house to the road to walk their dogs. And now the animals are starving. The crocodiles, they're starting to hang out around mailboxes because there's nothing to eat. And so they're looking for a human snack. Now, the situation is with this, that the Army Corps of Engineers could have put in these gigantic pumps that they put in other places, but there's wetlands around there, and the environmentalists are saying, we don't care how many farmers are underwater, how many houses are people riding in boats. They want to protect that wetlands. And that goes to the point earlier where you said that humans are not they're not a bacteria on the land,
Yeah.
Now,
I was
so
getting ready
they
to say that.
and
Yeah.
this lady that lives there actually was on the cover of NBC News. They interviewed her about how her life is riding a boat around and trying to have a life, which they can't. But now she's getting all kinds of hate mail because she said we're not against the wetlands, but we need some help with the pumps. And so now I don't even know, she might even get death threats. So simply because she wants the water issue to be resolved to live a normal life. My question to you is, how would you look at the wetlands versus the farmers and the people that live in that area?
So this is why I like bioregionalism over Confederacy, because the Confederacy was states that were named after kings in England and crap like that, instead of, in some states are, but they don't actually connect deeply to the land. And the reason why I say this now is because in my state of North Carolina, there's basically 3 or 4 bioregions. Where I'm at is I'm on the western part of the state. So I'm in the Appalachian Mountains. The Appalachian Trail comes through here. There's 7 ski resorts just around my area. This is a mile up. It's very cold here. We have our own climate. We have our own concerns. What's really important to us in the winter is that our roads are salted. It's actually not salt, but anyway, the point is that that's really important to us. We rely on the winter traffic. We rely on the summer traffic with leaves and whatnot. The tourism is very important to us. However, in central North Carolina, where it's flat, it's much lower, tobacco farming is crucial to them. So anything dealing with tobacco farming is really what their government's going to be about. They're going to want to support and help with that land. And then if you look on the East Coast, now you've got the not wetlands, but the boggish water. You've got the Outer Banks. It's a completely different ecosystem that has its own concerns. Now you've got maritime concerns. You've got all these different stuff. I'm saying this because if you take it back to Louisiana, New Orleans was built below sea level, and they just kept building. Now, the reason why they kept building, in my opinion, is because no one who was in charge actually lived there. There was no sovereignty there. Because of that, you had someone else coming in from outside and just doing whatever scored the most virtue. This is why virtue is so important at the time. So that virtue is going to be, well, we have to save the spotted owl, or we have to save the snail darter, or we have to do this, or we have to do that. These are the virtue, because we've already been mind controlled to think that men are scum, that people are scum. So anyone who's like, but my home is lost, is instantly going to be met with, so what? Who cares? You're bad. I don't care. What I care about is the owl, or this or that. Imagine if we had a system of sovereignty. I don't think New Orleans would look like New Orleans right now. I think it would look like totally different. I think people would be like, look, I live here. My grandkids are going to grow up here. What can I do that's going to make them look back at me and go, wow, my grandfather was a badass. He built we had a campaign for the dikes, and for once dikes were actually things that kept water away. And now the word dike means this, and we built, whatever it is that he's going to create. He's thinking about the future. He's doing what an elite does. He's thinking about his own bloodline. He has his own sovereignty tied up into that area. It's important to him. And because it's important to him, he's going to have a different solution that we're never going to think of. He's going to have something like the Cajun Navy, show up in airboats when the shit goes down. Something that would never happen anywhere else, around America. It's that very flavored look at what it's like in Louisiana and Mississippi to be in that kind of environment. This is where bioregionalism thrives. This is where Confederacy thrives, because Colorado can be Colorado, California can be California, Florida can be Florida, Mississippi can be Mississippi. This is what makes us great again, is allowing us to do what we need to do to make our own areas great, to make ourselves great, more importantly, to own our airspace.
Well, to your point, it's interesting about these pumps that could alleviate the flooding there. It was one of John McCain hated that whole plan so much. He said it was the most ridiculous plan that Congress has ever come up with. And here's a guy who, of course, double-jawed John McCain. He's dead. But it goes to your point. He didn't live there. Yeah. He could care less, man. And this is the problem with exactly what you said. These people don't live here. It's like Maxine Waters doesn't live in her area. Her area that she represents has got feces and needles all over it. She lives in a gated community. But the mind programming of that situation, they keep voting for her, man. She didn't even live there.
If we had sovereignty, the federal government would be a voluntary government. we would collect our taxes locally, like from the bioregional standpoint, so we can get by and do what we need to do. But the federal would be a tribute. It would be like just like Tennessee. Tennessee was called the volunteer state for a very specific reason, because during the I think one of the wars, they sent more volunteers than anyone else to fight. Like they believed in that. It became their motto, their battle cry. It became something they became proud of. It invigorated the land. This is a compassion-based government, not a coercive-based government. So it turns this federal idea of a government really into a system of men that have their hands open, that are literally begging the states for money. And if they're going to be begging our bioregions for money, they're going to be competing to do a good job. They're going to want to impress us so that we will send them more tribute next year. And that's why if we can convert our government from this centralized federal power into this bioregional government where it's voluntary based, you're going to see actually a better America emerge, because it's an America that's based on voluntarism. It's based on compassion. Compassion is the most powerful force we have in the world. In fact, if you look at the human body, no organ burns more calories than the brain. None. Like all your muscles, nothing burns more calories than the brain. And if you consider what the brain is, it's a giant empathy computer. It's literally 98% of it is lights up when it sees a face, because facial recognition is so important. It's feeding off your emotions. We're constantly broadcasting through almost telepathy. It's not almost, it's telepathy. Emotions are like this telepathic connection we have with each other. It's so powerful. And if we can harness that same force and put it into government instead of slavery, it's gonna change the entire ecosystem, matrix, world, universe, everything inside and out would completely change as a result of this, because now we're firing on our full cylinders of compassion instead of it being coercion, mind control, lies, and just trauma.
Yeah. What's the doggy's name?
Wiley and Butter. I'm not sure which one barked.
Let's see the doggy. Call him up here.
Butter's right there.
Butter, come here.
There's Butter.
Oh,
He's really old. I don't think he can hear anymore.
It must have been another
That's
one.
why he barked. See, he was.
Yeah.
I think someone walked
Was that
by
him? Okay.
and then my other dog just walked outside.
They just do whatever they want to. Sounds like
Yeah,
that's mind control. Sounds to me like they got you mind controlled because they can just come and go as they please.
You know, when we can choose our own controllers, we have sovereignty. And I've chosen these dogs as my controllers, so I'm good with that. I used to have a cat that bossed me around too, so yeah, it works fine with me.
All right. Well, I can't let you go. We're getting near the end of the broadcast. We've still got some time. But in your book, Blueprints of Mind Control, what's this? My First Alien.
So part of okay. So first of all, I don't know the truth. I'm just doing the best I can.
Yeah.
My First Alien is my take on what aliens are, on what extraterrestrials are.
Sure.
So My First Alien is basically me having a thought experiment with some people I had over dinner and describing, well, what would you do with that? And so it starts off with, because we like to enslave each other, right? Because we enslave each other. One day we will have our own slave if we don't already. And this slave would be a humanoid. It would be something that does what we want it to do. And in order for it to do that, we're going to need something that it's going to have to be sort of like a humanoid. It's going to need some arms and legs so it can walk around. We're going to need to carry boxes, so it's going to have elbows and stuff like that. We don't need it to have hair. We don't need it to eat. Because what if we can charge it like a photovoltaic cell, like let's say that what if we were to like mix chloroform, like how, that's how a plant controls it. It's charging from the sun. What if you could chloroform a human? I mean, not chloroform, you know what I mean? What if you could charge an alien from the sun and store him? Then you wouldn't need it. He wouldn't have to go to the bathroom. He wouldn't have to chew. He wouldn't need teeth. He wouldn't need a nose. He basically just needs a big antenna brain so he can hear what we want it to do, and it just needs the ability to do stuff. Now, as you started to develop this genetic humanoid, because you're a mind control person that controls the government, you're also constantly thinking about, how do I control people? And you'd easily have, hey, I could dress this guy up in a costume. I could tell everyone in the world that this humanoid, this robot, this cellular robot that I've made, is actually an advanced creature from a solar system 16 million light years away.
Okay.
And that creature came here to save us
Oh.
because remember step one? Step
Right.
one is you're broken, right?
Right.
So
Broken.
this little humanoid guy came here to save us. Now, as I was making this humanoid, I'd be like, okay, I don't want this guy to scare people too much. Like we want people to like this alien. So we need to make some movies like E.T. We need to give it nice big old kitty eyes, like cat eyes. It doesn't need to talk. It can't yell. It can't look mean. It can't be bigger than us.
Can't be like this creature here.
Say what?
It can't be like this creature here.
Well, this is exactly kind of what I'm describing. This one's a little bit more scary. But the idea is that what you're describing really is a butler. It's a sleek butler. He's shorter than you are. He's not as powerful as you are. He has like fluid muscles. He's not even as strong. So he's not intimidating, but he's still an authority figure. Okay. It's like the perfect mix of authority figure plus non-intimidating. And because we're promoting it as super evolved, oh no, he's light years ahead, Daniel, of all of us. So he understands the mistakes that we don't even know we're going to make yet. So we should really listen to what he has to say to us. And then he would tell us, well, you're poisoning the planet. 2 out of every 3 of you need to go, but it only needs to be these people. And these are the ones that I think are dangerous, And so by injecting this idea of space aliens for as many years through sci-fi, through Hollywood, you're setting up the idea for a Project Bluebeam type setting where you can introduce a savior, a extraterrestrial messiah, a reptilian space pope, as I call it in my book, Blueprints of Mind Control. You can actually install a reptilian space pope that could come down to Earth and could fix everybody by all of us joining together into this giant yoke that's dipped in gold that we'll think is special. And it's this yoke that ties around our neck. It might seem like a chain, but it's not because it's covered in gold. And so therefore it's not a bad thing. And we will end up embracing this idea of a super ruler from another land. And that's really what the My First Alien is about. It also talks about Crowley a lot and about what Crowley first saw. I think Crowley actually probably invented the extraterrestrial, the modern gray. He had a creature called Lamb. And I think that he saw the exact same thing. He saw an opportunity for a mind control spell that would fool the entire world. I think that there are wizards in the world. Al Gore is one of them. I could explain how Al Gore's recycling program is the same thing, but that we're creating these systems, and whichever one of us can control the most minds in the world is considered like this big shot among the elite. This is kind of how they compete, and this is also how they control it. Because if they can have people listening to them, they can control them. That's why you have the same actors always in the same movies. They need that person to have all the control. That's why the same pop singers
James, earlier
are played over and over again.
Earlier you were saying that the meaning of the LGBT. I mean, one of the connecting things of that is that there's no procreation of that. Now, also, could we put that in conjunction with the advent of these sex robots? I don't know how many times in my Facebook feed there's some kind of picture of a sex robot in there, and I thought you were going to say that these aliens coming down are going to be sort of like them too, that they're taking care of the sex part for mankind too as well, and certainly not going to be any procreation. But if there is, there's going to be some kind of hybrid-looking freak. But is it possible that as humans and begin to sort of mate with these sex robots, that perhaps demons will inhabit those robots?
It's funny you say that, because I've got like 3 chapters in my book about demons, specifically about demons, and because demons are a really interesting technology. I actually call them a technology in my book, and I just explain how they work and actually why. It's a really interesting. I almost don't even know where to start when getting into it, because it could be that. Okay, so first of all, before we saw aliens, we saw fairies. Before we saw fairies, we saw flying dragons. Before we saw flying dragons, we literally saw golden armies of people that were made out of gold in the sky that would stay there for like a month. There's like all this Chinese text of like a month-long stay of this golden army in the sky. Then you've got Ezekiel's chariot. You've got all this other stuff that people are seeing. And so in my book, I really analyzed what this actually means. One of the chapters is called The Technology of Demons. And it basically explains what are all the commonalities between all these visions. And this is part of why I don't necessarily buy the ET phenomenon. I say necessarily, by the way, because there's something called zeticism, which is basically a personal experience is the highest form of truth. I believe that's what gets you out of mind control. I say that because if I was to turn around and there was an alien behind me, I would have a different belief system the moment I saw that than I do right now. Right. Because all I've ever seen in my life is a craft flying over. And being in the Navy and being a sub hunter, I realized that, well, we could own that craft. I mean, it's not outrageous to think that, we would have some kind of anti-gravitics technology or something. So all that to say, back to demons, that demons seem to be a technology that's been around for a very, very long time. Long time, well beyond extraterrestrials. And it seems to be a better explanation for what's going on because all demons have one thing in common. They have to jack in to another consciousness in order for them to have a surrogate in the world, like an avatar. Right. They actually have to jack into it. And this is part of what I analyzed in my 3 chapters is I just kept looking at demon possessions and targeted individuals and schizophrenia. Because all 3 of these things have the exact same things in common, Daniel. They all have that same blueprint of this demon type thing coming in. Right now, because of American culture, we treat our schizophrenics as broken. In Africa, schizophrenics are considered tribal leaders. They're actually considered a blessing, and because they're known to be able to see things that other people aren't seeing. And part of in my book, I talk about meth, crystal meth. Because what's interesting about crystal meth is that the people who do crystal meth, which I'm not advocating, by the way, I'm just explaining what I read, they are seeing these similar demonic entities. And what's really interesting about the crystal meth people is that 2 people can be doing crystal meth at the same time and they see the same demon. Right. They have a shared freaking vision of a certain creature. Now, these creatures across the board, across the nation, brilliant mind, Jerry Marzinski. I highly recommend him. You actually could probably interview him, Daniel, if you haven't already. But he's a really brilliant guy. He's analyzed. He went to prisons and he analyzed all these clinical attacks.
What was his name, James?
Jerry Marzinski, Marzins Zinsky. Yeah. I think he's written a few books about this. I've just watched his interviews. This is how I know he's got some really detailed interviews in his writings and stuff. And he really helped me a lot to understand this. But the schizophrenics are seeing the similar things that the meth heads are seeing. And all these are tying back to ancient history too, where we're tapping into some sort of technology. I call it technology because I tie it into Carl Jung and dream psychology and the alchemy that happens through our dreams. Because none of us really walk around going, hey, maybe there's something more to dreams. All of us just kind of pretend like it doesn't mean much. But there's something really deep happening there on an archetype level, on this symbology type level. And so I think the alien really fits into that symbology because it was installed by Hollywood. And just one more point about this. When you install an idea, that idea vibrates inside your DNA. And there's something called epigenetic transfer, which means all your fears and all your wisdom can be passed down to your child. And I believe that these archetypes are something that is actually passed down. In fact, a spider doesn't learn how to make a spider's web. It is hatched knowing how to construct that web. In my mind, the spider web is an archetype. It's a vision that the spider has of what this architecture looks like. And so it's able to reproduce that. This is the same reason why some of us really are just ahead when we're born. And I think it's because our bloodline has more epigenetic wisdom installed in it through our past, through our ancestors than others. It's also why we are taught to not respect our ancestors. We're not tapping into the wisdom of our own blood type. Our own bloodline. I believe that I can tap into my grandfather. I know I can. I can tap into my grandfather and get power from him. And you can't, Daniel, because you don't know my grandfather. But on the same time, you can tap into your own bloodline and draw power from that I can't. So this is a technology, but it's been lost to the normal the normies out here. You know,
Right.
we are anesthesia addicts walking around, and we have this technology. But because of the way they shame it in Hollywood, if you look at how ghosts are treated, all ghosts are scary, all ghosts are terrifying. In a way, a ghost, it's not in a way, a ghost is your ancestor. It's the embodied spirit of your ancestor. But we're being taught from a very young age to fear that. All these things about demons and things, demon used to mean divine inspiration. Demon used to be the word daemon, Daimon.
Never
And
liked
it
that
was
name.
the living embodiment of the spirit. It was, and also it was all these different personalities. So there's a lot to this technology that's just covered right now that we're just not able to look at because we're too afraid. And whenever I see something that's afraid, this is something I talk about in the book. Whenever I see something that when I think about it, I feel shame or I feel fear or I feel pushback, I instantly run to it and go, what's there? Like I pull up the carpet because I've noticed that it's such a cipher to look at what they shame the most is always a powerful object hiding underneath that carpet that they've covered up.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of a video phenomena. Some little girl named Soph. She have you seen her in her videos?
Yeah. Actually, I
Sh
haven't seen her videos, but I've seen enough, to
Yeah, I
understand.
mean, she is terrifying the social giants. And why? Because she has a different. She's out of the reservation, man, and she has struck fear into their heart. And so, if they're wanting to, and they have banned several of her videos. I'm thinking, well, they're banning her because they fear her, and so that means she must be close to the truth. And I think that the other side is always trying to ban people that have the truth. They fear the
Yeah.
truth the most, more than anything.
The ones they shame the most are the ones that are the most dangerous. That's why I talk about the South. Well, if you can't believe how much has gone in to shaming the South. I mean, it's intense how much has gone into that. I'm not trying to say, by the way, that the South has it bad and everyone else has it great. Don't get me wrong. Just because I grew up in the South, I've really been able to watch it and see it. The Dukes of Hazzard thing, where they're like, "Oh, we can't even show this show anymore because it's got a Confederate flag on the top of the roof." It's just the latest example of just how
Well,
freaking whack that is.
That goes to Stacey Abrams' failed gubernatorial run. If you know who Stacey Abrams is, she's saying, well, this state is racist. You're racist because, and there's a plot against me. Well, it could be because she's stupid and nobody want to vote for her and it looks like she's eating too many ho-hos. I want somebody in office that is physically fit, man. I don't want an old crypt keeper like Joe Biden of 78 in there with no eyebrows or Hillary Clinton wearing a colostomy bag. I don't want these health degenerates in there. And that goes to the other point I make is, why do we have the stupidest people in office that are making decisions for our lives? You'd think there would be an IQ test before somebody gets in office. You have to have some kind of basic, intelligence so you can make good decisions. But we have the stupidest people we put in there. And your picture locked up. Sounds like the powers that be.
These are thoroughbreds. They're not autonomous individuals. And who's being put up is more about long-term social effects. Like how can introducing this character of Elizabeth Warren help us on other ways? She's going to come up here, she's going to lose to Trump, or she's going to do this, or she's going to do that. It's more about the long-term mind control effects, and mind control maybe even throws people off more. It's more about the long-term Post-it notes that are being stuck in our head that we're going to pretend like don't affect us, but they literally do. It's why I caught so much flack for saying the LGBT program is a eugenics program, because I'm instantly hit by people that think that I'm being anti-gay. But what's really prejudicial about this is actually very bigoted to assume that a Pride Month, having an entire month of Pride dedicated to pituitary development in children, it's very bigoted to assume that gay people are on board with that. Because I don't think that gay people automatically are signing up saying, yes, and during the month of June, I would like to have a parade where I celebrate the end of my bloodline by declaring to the entire world, I will never reproduce again. I don't think that's how gay people do it. And this sets up the golden child. This is a big theme in my book, is there's two ways to abuse someone, through golden child and through scapegoat. And this is how we abuse the golden child. The golden child never looks like they're being abused, because while they're being beaten, they're actually up on the pedestal. And this is what happens to black people. This is what happens to homosexuals. This is what happens to women. This is what happens to anybody when it comes time to punish people that are in this golden child standpoint. The same thing happens for the scapegoat. Trayvon Martin is a perfect example of that, where you've got these situations where someone is then outed as where they're the scapegoat for this situation. In this case, it would be the police department. But if you look at the Black Lives Matter and actually what went into this, I just got flack from this. A childhood friend dropped me forever and called me racist because I told him Black Lives Matter was a corporate controlled psyop. And it is. Wow. It was installed by corporations. So here's this guy telling me how racist I am because I'm not being a corporate stooge. He's basically calling me a racist for not adopting his corporate stooge bullshit. And if you look at the facts around Black Lives Matter, if you look at all the shootings that Black Lives Matter claims to be something of racism, it's actually literally exactly the opposite has happened in some of these cases, if not most of them. I'm not saying that there's not bad police out there. Of course there are. We have a coercive society that deals on psychopathy. You're going to have sociopaths that are going to say, I want to be a cop, just like you're going to have sociopaths that are going to say, I want to be the mayor. I want to be the governor, because all these people are giving free money. 40% of their entire sweat equity is going into a giant pot. And I'm allowed to go into that pot and take as much as I want. And all I have to do is feed people virtue for it. But I'm the one who's called a racist, Daniel, or I'm the one who's called a bigot, because I'm calling out what it is. LGBT program is a eugenics program, and people are stupid enough to fall for it. There are people that could have had children that did not, because they bought into this corporate narrative the entire time when they left high school, and they shamed themselves for thinking, well, being heterosexual is bad. I should be gay because I'll be more hip, because here's a show on called Queer Eye for the fucking straight guy. This is the kind of nut stuff that keeps being inserted. And the minute someone like me tells to tell the truth and say, hey, maybe you're gay because you watch TV, I'm called the bigot. Yeah. But I understand how social programming works. And there's nothing bigoted about me even questioning the fact, well, I don't know what causes gay. Maybe you're not born gay. Maybe you can culturally become gay. And there's nothing wrong with even saying that. But just even insinuating that people might have more sovereignty than they're given, that instead what should happen is, no, we're born into this. We're forced into this stuff. It's just this constant barrage of, I don't want my sovereignty. I want someone else to take control of me and put me in a fucking box and come milk me every morning and call that life. That's what we've been breeding around us. That's why I'm such a crazy guy, because I'm not accepting that. I'm literally outside shouting as loud as I can. Here's the blueprint for mind control. And it makes people mad. It's polarizing, and it only polarizing because the mind control. If there was no mind control, people wouldn't be mad at what I'd say, because they'd be like, well, James is just spouting off weird stuff. No, I'm not. I'm poking at chains that are attached to people's ankles and saying, this is a chain. You don't know it, but it is. Just because it's painted in gold doesn't mean it's a chain. But this is part of the golden child abuse. Abuse is coming, and they're calling it praise. They're calling it virtue. That's why virtue is such a mind fuck, because you're literally flogging yourself in public and you're getting virtue for that. People are like cheering you as you flog yourself in public. This is how sadism is. This is what masochism is all about. This is what psychopathy is. This is not normal. That's what we have to fix.
Well said, man. I sure hope people paid attention to this interview tonight. Outstanding work, James, and you go so deep, and that's why I wanted you to be on the program again. How can people get this blueprint for a mind control book of yours?
I would love if people bought this, because I want to keep writing. I want to keep spreading this message. You can buy an autographed signed copy of this on my website. It's actually free shipping right now. Just go to any of my articles, scroll down the bottom, read the article. You'll love it. And you'll see at the bottom here, buy my autographed book. It'll also take you over to Amazon. You can do the same thing. I am an independent writer. I am an independent activist. I really count on sales of this to keep me going. So I thank you so much, Daniel, for even allowing me to talk about this. This is important to me. I want my country back. I'm under the impression this book gets us there. I'm not saying this is the only panacea, but this is my best attempt, because me just complaining about things is not working. I have to try something different. And that's why I showed you all the blueprint, because I want more of us to see it. I want it to be an odd thing for someone to be under mind control. More importantly, I want us to start laughing at the person that's under mind control instead of us laughing at the person that's not under mind control, because that's what's happening right now.
Wow. Well said. Well said. All right. We have a link to your website, of course, in our bio section on The Edge. James True, I appreciate you coming back on The Edge television program. Can we have you back again sometime?
I would love to come back, Daniel. I love your energy. I love your audience. And yeah, I like our conversation. So thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
All right, everybody. That was